That's correct.
You never left? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, from it, it's just but it's good to see.
Yes. Back in LA, unfortunately.
Yeah, tell me about it.
All right. Wow. Good morning. All right, Chevra, good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas, Perek Gimel, Halacha Aleph. In the Oiz V'Hadr's edition, we are up to Daf Lamed Daled. We will start on Daf Lamed Daled all the way, Amud Aleph, all the way in the top of the Amid. We're dedicating this class in the merit of and in the immediate return of all of the Yidden that are currently kidnapped, Rahman al-Litzlan, and for the tremendous success of the IDF in winning the war. May they have that Hatzlacha today. Amen. Okay, so we are in the middle of the sugya of Avelus, and we mentioned that by the Su'udas Havra'ah, that was the last topic we learned about, the minig was to have a substantial amount of wine, not too much, but they had wine. We're going to learn now about the 10 cups of wine. This is a sugya that we had in Ksubas on Daf Ches, that we used to drink, how at some point they added to the 10 cups of wine during the Su'udas Havra'ah, and that was beyond the moderation. And from there, we're going to move on to number one, a question. Can a Kohen be metame himself for his Rebbe? As we just learned to Sugya, that a Rav to a Talmud, right? Rabban Gamliel was Makabel Tanchumen for Tavi Avdoi. The Gemara explained, aside of the issue that you're not Makabel Avevus for Avodim, aside of that, you only Makabel Tanchumen for Kroivim. And the answer there was Vishinamtum Levonecha, Levonecha Elu Talmidecha. So do we take it to the max? Could a Kohen be metame himself to his Rebbe? Can a Kohen be metame himself l'chvoid hatoira, as we'll learn a machloikas harom pshat when we learn the sugya inside? And finally, as we all know, that at some time the Chachamim made a gzeira that gush eretz ha'amim, and later avid eretz ha'amim are tamim midrabanan with corpse tuma. So the question is, can a Kohen b'chlal leave Eretz Yisrael? And I know there are kahanim that are all over the place, but the question is, how can they do that? And we will see that there are, being that tumah was only the Rabbanan lechatchila were not koizer in many scenarios. And finally, the final topic, if we'll have time, is to know whether a kohen can remain tamei to fulfill the mitzvah of Nesias Kapayim. Without any further ado, Chavra, let's start at Daf Lamed Daled. Lamed Aleph will be on top of the Amid, tamei. Says the Gemara, we learned in a Brais that Asara Koisois Shoisim Bebeis Ha'avol, that there are 10 cups of wine that should be consumed, and this is again in reference to the Sudas Havra'ah. That's the meaning over here of the Beis Ha'avol. Shnaim Lifnei Hamaz, and Rashi in Ksubas writes that the two that they would consume prior to the meal is because wine has the koyach of opening up your appetite. There's a whole story of the Baal Shem Tov, how he was trying to go to Eretz Yisrael to meet Arachaim HaKadosh. There are two versions of that story. One is that he ended up in the Sambatya. Like the other story is that he reached all the way to Turkey, and over there he was there at a Pesach, and he was already 3 days fasting, and there was a person that invited the Baal Shem Tov over. He met actually his daughter Adel, that was washing their clothing over there on the port, Lochavid Yantiv, and the Baal Shem Tov, because of this chazal that to open up your appetite, you drink wine. Imagine the Baal Shem Tov was from hunger, was hungering for days. He had a cup of wine, and therefore the balabas thought that's why he fell asleep. And there was a whole story of Lois and the Flois Gedoygos Levade Vein Kanamakim. But anyways, wine opens up your appetite. So they would drink 2 cups of wine before the meal. And actually, Sudas Havra is because when a person is in that deep state of mourning, especially right after a burial, it's normal for people, the close relatives, to lose their appetite. So we want to open up their appetite. They should go back to living. Huh? Because drinking wine is good to digest the food. So if you have a lot of the chveis yeshivish food, schnitzel, what they serve with oil, you have to drink the worse the food, the more the wine. Wine helps your body break it apart. And then they would have 3 after the meal. Now, why would they have 3 after the meal? Says the Braisa, Elu shloisha shel achri hamazon, echad lebirchas hamazon, pashit. Now, lohoyer, that now, who drinks the 1 cup of birchas hamazon? The one who is the one who leads the benching, not everyone. Lohoyer, that the 10 cups were consumed by all of the mourners. The echad legmilas chasadim. Big machloek is what this refers to. Let's learn over here the pshat that they drank it in honor of all of the people that were doing the ultimate gmilos chesed, the chesed shalemes, the people that were involved in the burial v'chuli. And ve'echad listen chumei avelo, that were the 10 cups of wine. However, now guys, we will learn the girsa as the Shinu Nuschois brings it down, and then the flow of the Braisa will actually fit a lot better. That this is not the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, but this is Rabban Gamliel. And don't forget, guys, Rabban Gamliel was the one that asked when he passed away prior to his passing that he should not be buried in silk. He was the one that gets all the schos that he made the burials a lot more affordable until we figured out how to go against this Gezeda today. But before that, it became affordable. So everyone, what were the 3? We'll see why we mentioned this Rabban Gamliel in a moment. Echad lechazan hakneses. The chazan hakneses, according to the Rashirilio, he writes, the person in the shul who inspires everyone to do mitzvahs, not what's called in English the chazan, the Baal Tefillah, to the one, to the mefsoyim one. The echad l'roish hakneses. The roish hakneses, says the Rashirilio, is not the president of the shul, but it's the dayan. Okay, dafka the dayan, maybe not even the rabbi. It's a different function. And the echad, now it fits. The echad l'Rabban Gamliel. Once everyone would drink a cup of wine to thank him, that because of him, the burial was more affordable. Pashut people, Chazal say that it became so expensive to bury that people, Pashut, from shame of not having the money, there were no credit cards then. They would take their relative, they would put the relative in a city somewhere in front of a Beis Din, and they would run away. God forbid. Now the chiyuvin should all Beis Din shoyim mishtakin v'holchin, but once they started to add, then now 13 cups of wine. That's already people are getting shikir. So gazru aleim, and what happened? V'hechzidu l'mekoyim. And this v'hechzidu l'mekoyim, a big machlokes in Bavli between the Rishonim, what it means. And that one pshat will be that Rashirilio writes, he's a achid. V'hechzidu l'mekoyim means they said not 13, yes the 10. But the Rambam doesn't learn that way pshat in the Gemara. And within many other Rishonim, V'chzidul l'makayman means, going back to the story that we learned in the end of Daf Lamed Gimel, that you have to drink wine, especially during the meal, but in moderation. And V'chzidul l'makayman meant that even the 10 cups of wine, you think about it today. Today, many people, when they have the 4 koises over the whole Seder, they get a little bit intoxicated. Even though the people drink more than a Revi is. True. But they're not that much more. 10 cups of wine is a lot of wine. Okay. Right. Huh? Well, it was they diluted it. The cups that they drink would be a Revis, but it would be diluted wine. Whether it's a third, whether it's a fourth, only of wine. Okay. Okay, says the Gemara, let's go. So now that we are learning the laws of mourning, Kohen Midoiraisa is not allowed to contaminate himself to corpse tuma. A Kohen can contaminate himself to any other tumas for a reason. Stam, like any other yid, stam to become tamei. However, the Torah writes that for the 7 relatives, they have an obligation to contaminate themselves. So if a Kohen, God forbid, loses a relative, he goes to the burial, etc. Question is, guys, if you're cold, we can shut this off. I don't know. There's a button over there. Kohen Maushe Yitamel Rabbi. That's the big kash over here. In other words, let's go. In Bava Metzia, what did we learn, guys? What did the Mishnah write? That if a person finds 2 lost articles, remember that Mishnah? And you can only return one of them, you have to pick one. One will get lost. The other one will be Yolchab. And it's between your father and your Rebbe, says the Mishnah, that you take the Aveda of your Rebbe and you return it to him. Your father brought you L'chayil L'ma'azah, your Rebbe brought you L'chayil L'ma'abah. How far do we take it to? And as we quoted before, right? So let's go. If a kohen's a Rebbe here means the person who taught him the Rav of his Torah. Can a kohen by the burial be metam himself like he could for his father? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yanai ze'era the mach chamoy. His father-in-law passed away. Now we're going to continuously learn the Charedim. So he writes like this. First of all, a person is chayiv to honor one's father-in-law. However, as the Gemara will unpackage, just for father-in-law, there was no question. A kohen cannot be metame himself for his father-in-law, even though there's a certain added honor you have to give to Yishved more than to any other Yid. Happened to be that his father-in-law was also his Rebbe. So now the question is, right? Who meaning the shver of Rabbi Yanai was not only Chamai but also Voya Rabbi. And now the question is, this is really our question. And Shal ul Rabbi Yosi and Va'asale. Now, why was Rabbi Yosi asering? So the Charedim, to explain the Gemara for it to flow, Mamash Gishmak says that it was a suffix. No. I take it back. No. The Charedim writes over here that Rabbi Yosi had a doubt. He had a suffix. But since a kohen cannot be metam himself midoy raisa, so because you have a suffix, add sheval taisa. Don't do anything. No, it's he paskin that to him because of his doubt. Shol Rabbi Yosi va'asale. Shema Rabbi Acha. Rabbi Acha heard. V'amar means v'amar. No, Yitamol loy talmidov. Yitamol loy talmidov. Yuvaldik. Now adds the Charedim a whole other layer, and that is that since Rav Acha held there isn't a suffix, Vadai, even though it's a kohen, he has to be metame himself for his Rebbe. Even though which means, guys, that mido so you have to mourn for your Rebbe. So now says the Charedim, look inside 3 lines right under the Gemara, the medium-sized line. Well, if he should become Kamei for the burial, why? Because he's like a because he's like a son. If you're like a son, then he's chayv and aninus, which means that he's not allowed to eat meat and he's not allowed to drink wine. And by the way, that also allows us to understand the flow of the Gemara better. It's not just for learning Hilchas Avelus, Tamakasha, and Avelus. So we just came off the sugya of Yain. That's where we went. That an oinen is asur, and then when you go into Avelus by Havrah, then you drink. That was like the Havdalah. Now you get the Hemshach. It's like this the flow. Oh, according to Rabbi Yosi was machmer, but Rabbi Yosi was machmer. It says argues the Charedim because he had a doubt. If that's the case, Rabbi Yosi holds that a Talmud is also not allowed to drink wine and eat meat. No, it wasn't that Rabbi Yosi was saying is the Talmud is nothing. I don't know. So when it comes to the Isur of Tuma, Sheval Taisa, Safik Daraisa, can you drink wine, have a Safik Daraisa? Maybe you are a Levanecha. No, Rabbi Yosi was machmed on both sides because he had a doubt. And Rabbi Acha at least was consistent. You are a child. You can be matama yourself, but for sure, zicher vada, you can't have wine and you can't eat and drink. And by the way, this also addresses that normally when you have a shaila, you don't ask tu rabban. You don't ask tu rabban. You're not allowed to do that. But they explain over here that since Rabbi Yosi, that's the Charedim speaks it all out. That since Rabbi Yosi didn't paskin bevadai, he says, I have a doubt. Since I have a doubt, be machmed. So then another enough can say, I don't have a doubt. Vadai, like a child, Father, you can't eat meat. Father, you can't drink wine. And yes, be metama yourself. Now, Rabbi Yosi, when Rabbi Yosi passed away, nituloi talmidav, including Kahana. Now, this is not so problematic. Why is it not so problematic? Because Rabbi Yosi had a doubt. Because he didn't go mamash against the psak of the Rebbe. He had a suffix. So he says if our Rebbe had a Havamina, that may be a Talmud, that we're a Talmud, we're a Shal, we're going to be Matar. The problem was that they weren't consistent. So they were lenient on both sides. They were Matama themselves for him, even though it's not really a leniency. They did it out of love, out of respect for the Rebbe, but they were not noiganinus. So for that, you guys for sure sinned one way. So then lama chaltam basav lama shishisam yai. Ve'imei atam isablim is lamanit meisem. This is gavaldik, and by the way, which means that Rabbi Mana, that's what the Charedim argues, also had a safek. He also had a doubt. That's why he said Mimanavsha. If Rav Mana would have known either way, they are a Talmud, right? Or they are, or not. If he would have known, you don't tell them this line. You tell them that what you did is wrong. Because if he would have felt that they're sons, then he would have told them your drinking wine was a sin. You're an oinen. If he would have felt that they don't have a din of a son, which means that they were, then he would have told them that you're not allowed to be matama yourself. By him saying you for sure mimanavshach did a sin, what he was basically telling them is like your Rebbe had a doubt, you have to adopt a doubt. And since there is a suffix, you don't know which sin you did, but bevada you violated one of the two. That goes Gaval.
Rabbi,
yes.
Just to clarify, this eating meat and drinking wine that they did was before the burial. Had it been after the burial, then everyone would say it's okay.
Sure. I listen, Danny, I don't know the minhagim of Avelim today. I know that in the Chabad community, by us, an oinen drinks meat and eats meat and drinks wine. Not an oinen, an oval. I'm sorry, an oval. Saying I don't know if all the other Avelim in other communities, if they have
the Sfardim, they don't drink, they don't eat meat in Avelis.
And we do. Right. I mean, that's the whole sugya. According to the Chazal, no problem. That's the difference between Aninus and Avelis. That's also why when it comes to mourning, you go from the shock of the death and you wean yourself off mourning. That's the dinam of Avel. In other words, you go from an oinen, I can't even eat meat. Then an oval, taka oval, but he could eat meat. And then you go from the shivim to the shloishim, you can't cut your nails. In other words, you go down, you go away from the mourning. When it comes to the 3 weeks, Mashiach should come this year, should come now, we won't have it, but when we practice the 3 weeks, your mamish go in the opposite direction. But since most people don't feel the pain of the Churban Abayis, we wean ourselves to feel the Churban Abayis. So we begin with the 3 weeks, which is the least dinam of mourning. And then we go into the 3 weeks. Into the 9 days, I'm sorry. And by the way, even in the 9 days, let's go according to the Sfardim, right? They also machalik that. Was at the latest point do we not have wine and meat? At the latest point. Likewise, to reflect the oinen. No. Okay, right. Now, here we go. Now here, there's a big machloikas, Humam Shrid over here. It's a little Gemara, but it's not little at all. In what the Gersa is, listen, there's only one way to learn it. I'm going to learn it with the Pnei Moshe. There isn't enough time. It's like a whole different Gemara. Completely different in the way you are going. The Gersa of the Pnei Moshe is, Ma'u she'yitam ha'koyin l'chavoid ha'toyra. I'm just reading, and I want to read inside the Charedim. It's like in the middle of the narrow, inside the Pnei Moshe. I'm sorry. Let's learn the Pnei Moshe. Ma'u she'yitam ha'koyin l'chavoid ha'toyra, which means, lil mo'toyra. Okay, we're speaking about a koyin. Im hoylech lil mo'toyra. And v'tzarech la'avar b'mokim hatuma ve'ein sham derech acher. So do we say, will a kohen be allowed to start to be matama himself? Okay, which is quite amazing. In other words, there's a havamina. It's an explicit psukim in the Chumash, right? Emer, Pashas Emer, that a male kohen is not allowed to contaminate himself. Befedish. The Torah doesn't give exceptions. The Torah gives exceptions. Ki'im, l'she'eroi, the seven relatives by the burial. Only by later a kohen can also not be matama himself to go to the Beis Achai. Nevertheless, the Gemara wants to know maybe if he's going to learn Torah and ain't sham derech acheres, a kohen should be allowed to become tummy with corpse tomb. Okay, And the response, this is becoming common. The response to the kasha is simply saying stories of Amoraim. Mamash like Hasidim. Can you do that? I have a story with the Rebbe. That's it. That was the answer. This is what this tzaddik did. This is what that tzaddik did. They're not having an intellectual debate. They're going straight to the halach. In the Bible, there's more. What's the reason behind it? What's the svara behind it? Here, it's what's the source. The source is a pasuk, or the source is Sipuri Tzadikim. It's one of the two. Beautiful. So let's go. Story number one. Rabbi Yossi Avi Yosef Masni. Rabbi Yossi was sitting and teaching. And what happened was, Va'al Meson. And they brought a maze into the Beis HaKnesses or Beis HaMedrash, which was common because where is there a place for people to gather to eulogize? There isn't enough place. That was the Beis HaMedrash, was the biggest public room. Now, the Talmidim that were learning, no one was going to stop for the eulogy if it's not for a big Talmud. The question is, do they have to run out? They're middle of learning. Just because someone passed away and they brought him into the Beis HaKnesses, that will be a story that if a kohen is allowed to become tamei l'chavoi Torah, then they can keep on learning. That will be a good example. So the example that Pnei Moshe gave was they're going to shir, and the only way is here. It's different. It's the same concept. They're already in a place. They're already learning. If they're going to have to leave, they're going to miss the shir. There was no recording then. So what happened? Man de nafak le lo yamar leikol. Just like again, divided with the Charedim, just like Rabbi Yossi before had a suffix whether vishinamtem levanecha halachically mamash means talmidecha. Here also, whoever left the shir, Rabbi Yossi did not protest. Like, why are you leaving? Uman de Yosef le vayta lo yamar leiklum. In other words, Rabbi Yossi had a suffix. I'm reading inside the Pnei Moshe again. Or not. I have a feeling that this suffix and the suffix we had in the sugi before, the way the Charenim learned it, right? Whether a Talmud kohen can be matam himself for his Rebbe. So even though Rabbi Yossi, the way we are learning, had a suffix, I think it's the same suffix. Right? I think it's the same suffix because why would it be a son? Because he taught him Torah. You didn't even learn yet. You're right. A good point. Okay. Next, story number 2. Rab Nechumya, Bereid Rab Chia bar Abba Amar. That what? That Abba, Rab Nechumya, the son of Rab Chia bar Abba. Rab Chia bar Abba was a kohen. Lo yahava chois ki prasad de kesaden. He would never pass beneath a certain archway in Caesarea, Kesaden. And why is that? Says the Pnei Moshe, because people knew that there were some remnants of a Yiddish person buried underneath it. Even though he was going to learn Torah, he would not go there. I want to add something. Does it mean was there another way? There's no raya if he didn't go there, but there was another way. It means that he didn't. Because Tumas oil, a Jew, Kula Alma, and even L'Rabban and even Goyim, if they're buried under a oil, whoever goes under the same oil becomes Tamei Corpse Stone. So he writes that Rab Nechumya never went there, but Rab Ami did go there. In other words, Machloikas Amoraim. Rabbi Yossi had a doubt, and here there's a Machloikas of the fact that Rab Ami, which obviously was a Kohen, when he went to a shir, he went under a certain archway, knowing that there's stuma there is araya that a kohen can become Tamei Corpse stuma lenusach of the Pnei Moshe l'chuvay Torah. And the final story, Rab Chizkiah v'Rabbi Kohen. Now v'Rabbi Kohen again. I'm going to read once the Shinon Neschais. He writes Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, which is Gavaldik, and this is the same Rabbi Yossi. It's all it's get the hemshach so. But let's go the way it's written over here. V'Rabbi Kohen, V'Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, have a metaylan be'ilen pilait yoisa the tzipoide. They were going through the plazas and tzipoide and yelekipam, and they knew that under this archway or under a certain covering, Vlad, there was someone was buried there. So uperish Rabbi Kohen, he separated himself. How far did he separate himself? Until when he needed to. But he once his chavedim reached a place where they were not under an oil, so then when he rejoined them. And Amaloin, and he told him, but my asking. But my asking means, when Yidden are walking, what do you think they were talking about? They were talking and learning. You wanted to know what type of conversation did he miss out. Turning to Daf Lamed Daled Amid Beis. So Amar Rab Cheskel Rabbi Yaakov Bar Achon. Loy Temer Loy Klon. I love it. Don't tell him what we were learning. Azoi. Now, in other words, Rab Cheskel was Broiges. Now we have a doubt. Why was he Broiges? So now the Gemara says, I mishum de ve'ishlei de parash, that Rab Cheskel was upset that either it's Rabbi Kohen or we said Rabbi Yossi Kohen that he separated himself. Why was he upset? Because Rab Cheskel held that shemitami l'talmud Torah. No, they were in the middle of a Torah conversation. And he was vadai of the opinion that you're a Kohen, even though he's not allowed to meet Torah, become Tamid. If you're in the middle of learning, and even though you're going through a makom of Tumah, the Kohen should join. You left, you lost. Lo Yadin, we don't know whether that was, or maybe the Imishum that have a Tyson, or Tyson means that they were so into the learning, they were so deep in the sugya. You know how it feels when you're in the middle of a very complicated sugya, and then a newbie comes and they wanted to give me a quick recap where they killed the whole thing. You just ignore him. That's the way to do it. So we didn't know that. So Vaited, in other words, the Gemara is pointing out that other than in the second story, where we see a clear machlokes hamaroim, it was something that remained a doubt. It's not so clear. It's not so clear whether a Kohen can become Tamil Chayda Torah. How great is that? And now the next Inyan. And as we spoke out in our introduction, so but you know what? Instead of reading the Gemara, let's go straight into the Charedim. Let's go back to our Charedim. And the Charedim is 12 lines from the top. He spoke it out on the intro, but it's good to remember, guys, right? I know we didn't read the Gemara yet. I just want to read the following. That in Perikam of the Shabbos, which is the whole sugya of the Shmoyne Asar Davar, if you remember, that they were Goyzer Balias, Hanani ben Chizkiah ben Garim. Yeah, thank you. So over there says the Charedim, and Shabbos Yud Daled Amid Beis. The Gazru, there's a lot of winged creatures, malachim coming to join us. The Gazru, Chachamim, Tuma, Al Kol Chutz La'aretz. She added to Amen. And there were two stages in that Gezeda. They made a Gezeda number one, that the entire Chutz La'aretz has corpse Tuma. Why? Bishum Safik Kvar Shalahem. Because the Goyim never made the types of efforts that the Jewish people made in marking places of burial. And therefore, maybe wherever you're walking over a body. Now, the Charedim reminds us, hold on, so what? Goyim, do they give up corpse tuma? Machlokes Chachamim and Hashem Bar Yochai. Hashem Bar Yochai says that only Atem Kruim Adam. That's the famous Atem Kruim Adam. Adam Atem. And then, Tumas oil is not Shayach to Goyim. The Kivrei Goyim, according to everyone, B'tamim B'mago B'mas. And according to the Rabbanan, means not rabbinically. According to the sheet of the Chachamim, they also give up Tumas oil. Even according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, that says that they don't give up Tumas oil, but the Maga B'Masa they do. And therefore, even according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, there's no debate. The Chachamim, in the times of the Tanoim, said, and it was a step gezeder. Rashi, the Charedim doesn't say it over here. Number one was Gush Eretz Amen Mizmatami. Gush means the Gush, the land. But then, if you would put a coin in a box and you would carry him on the shoulders, then you can take him to Chutz La'aretz. So the Chachamim says the Avir Eretz Amim is Matam. So now we have a kasha. How can Ido Kohen be over here B'chlal? How can any coin live Chutz La'aretz? He's being Matama himself. So now you get the flow. So we already learned. God says a coin cannot become Tommy. God says the only exception is for burial of the 7 relatives. Mitamal, we're saying a coin can become Tommy to the burial of his Rebbe. Maybe if a kohen is learning and they bring a mason to the room, he doesn't have to leave. Oh, so there's some hetadim. This is lechatchila only a tumah derabana. So we will see that there are many cases which lechatchila they were not goyzer on the kohen. That's what we're going to learn over here. So Tani, we learned in the Braisa that metama kohen v'yoytze chutz la'aretz for the following. Number one, ledina mamanis. Ledina mamanis means that he has something and he has to adjudicate to get it. Now, does that mean he's the guy that perhaps owns the property? No. That means that he's the judge. So there was a judgment case, and you need a big Rav, a big Dayan who understands Choshen Mishpat. The Kohen knows it, so the Kohen can go for that. Certainly, Levin and Nefashis. Again, we're speaking about him not being the on trial, but him being the judge. And even though that normally, guys, as we learned that Kiddush HaChodesh and Ivur Shana, normally Kimitzi and Teitzei Soira. On the other hand, we also learned that and that happened during the Roman persecution, that the greatest in Torah happens to be living b'chutz la'aretz. So if they have to make a judgment call whether to be ma'aber tashana, they would do it with the greatest chacham. That's why the Rif Kiyadua, he was the one that he went back to Al Pi Re'iyah. Imagine, even though he was b'chutz la'aretz. So in other words, if they're adjudicating such a case, he can go there. Now, ulahatzel sodom in hagoy. Here we're not speaking about him as a judge. So here is very interesting. It sounds like that if the Kohen owns land b'chutz la'aretz and a goy took it, he can go to try to get it back from him. Says the Charedim, that's not the pshat. Charedim says, if a goy took Jewish land in Eretz Yisrael, if a goy wrongfully stole Jewish property in Israel, but we're speaking about during the times of Golus. That means other nations like today are controlling Israel. Like America is the dominant power. We're not independent at all. So that happens many times. The goyim decided that this is going to be tried in another place. So the kohen, the owner of the land, can go b'chutz la'aretz to defend this property because he's not defending property that he owns outside Israel, according to the way the Charedim learns. It is amazing. Im goy ona soda be'eretz Yisrael shari kohen latzis chutz la'aretz ladon bar choy shel goyim lahatzal yadoi. Why? Because there's a mitzvah for there to be less goyish ownership in the land of Israel. And so explains the Nemuka Yosef, which is very important. And we'll leave it at that. Okay. Now, another thing. Not only is it if a goy already took it, but va'afilu litoir yoitze va'oirein oleho. In other words, the way the Moshe learned, even if he doesn't know for sure that he's going to get it back, but he has a chance of getting it back, that's the way the Pnei Moshe learns. Other learns that even if he's going out there to prevent a goy for the future, since we're speaking about Jewish ownership in the Holy Land, it's a mitzvah, and the kohen goes chutz la'aretz, even though the kohen doing so, he's becoming tamim midrabanan to corpse tum. Another exception to learn Torah. I mean, imagine now you get the hemshach. I mean, there was a havamina. There's one side that we just had that lilmoi Torah, even doiraisa. Here it's tumas derabanan, or lisa isha, to marry a wife. Okay. And says the Charedim, very importantly, hold on, that if that's the case, why are they allowed to do so? Because they're keeping a mitzvah. So why didn't the Braisa write to keep mitzvahs? And a Chanami says the Charedim, the kol shchein l'shan mitzvahs, which are more chashuv than these two, because these two, you can argue, learn Torah in Eretz Yisrael. But you want to marry an Israeli wife and go deal with her. You can marry her. You have to marry Punkta of Chutz La'aretz, Nika. All the Israelis leave Almanas Lahachsa Miyad. They're about to go back. All of them. That's a given. Yeah, very good. Okay. Now Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, Im Yeshloi Me'echoin Lilmoid, that if there is an option of learning in Eretz Yisrael, he argues with that. He says, hold on, you're right, you would prefer to learn b'chutz la'aretz. But if there's some option in Eretz Yisrael, al yitama. But he doesn't speak about a wife, at least that not. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Oimer, Im Yeshloi Me'echoin Lilmoid Torah. Nevertheless, yitama. He argues with that. He says that no, it doesn't work that way. That even though you have an option in Israel, to learn Torah, you can go chutz la'aretz. And as he writes, not everyone is able to learn from anyone. That's the way it works. Even though he had an option of learning Torah in Eretz Yisrael. And Sidon was not conquered, not by Yeshua, certainly not conquered, not resettled by Ezra, even though Sidon is going to be part of Eretz Yisrael in the conquest that God willing will make now with Mashiach. But until then, up until now, it was never included yet in the boundaries that was consecrated either by Yeshua or by Ezra. Okay. So now says the Braisa that even though we learned before, so Rabbi Yossi was lenient when it comes to learning Torah. Avol amru al yetze kohen l'chutz la'aretz. That if it comes to getting married, he was more machmir. Torah you could. A wife, the only time is ela imkein ifticha lo isha. Ela imkein ifticha lo isha. In other words, if you're going on a shidduch date, you're not allowed to go. Because a shidduch date means she might not want. Shidduch date doesn't only mean that you might not want. It means that she might say no. The only time you're allowed to go is she already promised to marry. Now you have to go meet her to see who she is. Then you're going to shidduch date. It's a whole different type of shidduch date. That's why the Hasidim goes like that. First they made up, and now you go date twice. Not they're liberal. Sveimo. Okay. Says the Gemara. Final. Let's go. We have time. The final.
Sounds like Omri has to stay in Eretz Yisrael.
Omri should get married to Meir of the Yemenu. Amen. Don't tell him what he should do. Okay, that's what it needs to do.
Amen.
Now, now here there's a huge. Now Mendel mentioned before the big difference between going to learn Torah, which is what the Pnei Moshe learned, or you're already sitting and learning. Now this will be the big underlying unspoken. But let's read inside the Pnei Moshe. And the Pnei Moshe really is gonna answer a problem with the Charedim. We're gonna just fly over to Kol HaChatchila Ribet. The Nesias Kapayim, look inside the Pnei Moshe, middle of the Amid. Im yeshtum beis hakneses. Imuter lishois sham b'shvil lisas kapov. Okay, you see the word lishois sham. That's very different than entering, and we're going to leave it with the Pnei Moshe. So a kohen is in the shul, and we learned before when they would make burials, they would make a eulogy. Where would they make a eulogy? They were going to the Beis HaMedrash. The people that were learning would ignore it. They would keep on learning. Mevatlin Talmud Torah, maybe however that worked out. So a kohen is in the Beis HaMedrash. They didn't yet duchen. They brought in people, it's like 770. You see what's going on. Here people are learning, here people are davening. Here they decided to bring a mason to make a eulogy, to say Tehillim. And the kohen, the question is the kohen allowed to stay in the Beis HaMedrash? He didn't walk in there, he's there. They brought the mace in there. Does he have to run out? Or can he stay in the Beis HaMedrash to fulfill the mitzvah of duchening? Now, this will also lead us into Esadoi Chaloisa. So there is a mitzvah saseh for a kohen to duchen. That will be the reason why he would be allowed to stay there, as we'll see in the Gemara. Yes. The mace entered. No. Okay. Before the sugya, a kohen cannot contaminate himself if he's in a place and there is a mace there. What should the kohen do? He has to leave immediately. Here, the question is that Bnei Moshe says, can he linger on until they are duchening? The Charedim, we're not going to go with the Charedim, but the Charedim, 4 lines under the Gemara writes that the question is whether he's allowed to enter. That's a much bigger question. He's not in there. There's a mace in the Beis HaMedrash. They're also davening. They need a kohen. They tell the kohen, come duchen. Question, according to the Charedim, is whether the kohen is allowed to enter to duchen. That's a much bigger question. The way it's not going to work with what the Gemara is going to say. So the Pnei Moshe, to avoid the question that everyone will have on the Charedim, says, no, he's already there. Only question is whether he's allowed to stay there. So what do you mean by running out? We don't say that since you're coming anyway, we don't do that. If that would be the case, a kohen can go to a cemetery. Then when the kohen was born in the hospital in the stomach, he became tummy already because they were mason. Okay. And here again, so it comes to a mice. Now, Makbila is Shem Chacham. That answers that for people who struggle. That's what the Charedim says. Makbila. Who was Makbila? Achoy de Rab Abba Bar Koyen. Achoy de Rab Bar Koyen. Omar Komei Rabbi Yossi b'Shem Rab Acha. He sent it from Rabbi Yossi in the name of Rab Acha. That Rab Acha said, Metame Koyen l'Nesias Kapayim. Let's go with the Pnei Moshe. He's in the shul anyways. They brought in a mace. Does he have to run out? Yes. But if they have to duchen, he can stay on to duchen. Who said that? He quoted Rabacha. Shama Rabacha. Rabacha heard he's being quoted. And Vemar, And he said, "Ano lo yom neslei klum." In the Yerushalmi, until now, we already had you die for doing that. You got to be careful. You quoted the Ramaita wrong, you're finished. But now, first, I never said such a thing like that. But then Ravacha began to try to figure out, why would Magbili even say such a thing? Where did it come from? He says, aha, maybe, what did he hear from me? Elokai, the Omar, right, the Mar, the Yehuda, that I quoted Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, the name of Rabbi Lazar, that what? That kol koin shu oy made bebeis hakneses. That's like the Pnei Moshe's case. You're already there. Bechlal, if you're in there, the eino noises kapov, and when you're in there, not they have to go in there, and you're not going to duchen, you're over ba'aseh. Okay, so that's clear. In other words, David al-Aron, Albanav Lemer Koisev Baruch isn't a nice thing to do. That the kohen has the koyach to give a bracha. Yes, but he's commanded to give a bracha, and he violates an asay. So therefore, Ravacha is trying to figure out, why would he say it? Maybe trying to figure out he shouldn't die. He's not so bad. Which is a rule in the entire Torah. Right? Problem, but I never said such a thing. Now, why? Says the Charedim, beautiful. I'll tell you why I never such a thing. Because the Kohen, the issue with the Kohen becoming Tameh isn't only a lav, it's also an essay. Where do you have the mitzvah say that a Kohen is not allowed to become Tameh? Says the Charedim, Kedoshim Yil Elokehem. So becoming Tameh, remaining pure, is both an assay and a lois assay. A Kohen giving Birchas Kohanim is only an assay. Now, that he justified Magbila a little bit, he doesn't have to die. He only has to get whipped. Fine. So he says, I Sune, bring him here. I'll give him Malchus, and we're good with that. We're letting him off the hook. We're being a chesedik with him. Okay. Says the Gemara, Rababo, have a Yosef, Masne, Bekinishna, Madadasa. Madadasa means the midah. Madadasa says over here, it was large. He was sitting and learning in the large, in the great Beis HaKnesses of Kesada, and these are all wealthy people. And V'havatam and Mesa, and there was already a corpse inside the building. Now they were learning not in the Beis Medrash himself. They were learning in the open courtyard. They were learning in an open courtyard. There was a mace in the Beis HaKnesses because prior to burial, that's where people would gather to make the hesp. And Asos into the Nesirus Kafayim. Time for Birchas Kohanim came. Okay. And V'loi Sha'alun Lei means that my Talmidim that were Kohanim didn't even ask me whether they are allowed to enter. That's going to go more with the Charedim. Whether they are allowed to enter, because they presumed, how can they enter? And this goes better with the actual Pnei Moshe, was when we were in there, there was a question. To go in there was nothing to ask. Fine. Problem was that also when it came time to eat, now the food was not served in there, just to make it clear. So the Charedim writes beautiful. He says that when the mace would be taken out of that shul, the only way to the Beis HaChaim would be to leave the same Pesach that leaves the Chatzar. And midarabanan, a kohen cannot pass through a gateway where there's going to be a mace passing through there. Midarabanan. Yeah, if you can read it, that's what the Charedim writes over here. That was the issue, which is Gavaldi. And they never asked me. So on my loin, now I got upset at them. I told him, right? Eating and drinking, you didn't have a shaila, even though you can't compare. I mean, because here they were not going to go inside here, but here they were doing something that was problematic, but they needed to eat. For sure, you're not allowed to become tummy. Did you ask me whether you're allowed to do that? He criticized them. So what happened? They didn't eat. So Kevin the Shamun came and they heard this criticism. Each one ran back to learn. They ran back. The Rebbe got upset. They went to eat. No more eating. All of the Kohanim. Oh, this is only the non-Kohanim went to eat lunch. There was more food for the rest of us, but the Kahanim went hungry. We're going to continue. I need someone to press the button over there.
Go ahead.
Okay.